Now let's take a look at Grand Adventure's return, brought to you by Grand Wagoneer. Randall, how about this U.S. team 2 years ago?
Look, 2021, they were, the best on record, the best team ever. They were plenty young. They were obviously hungry. They were looking to sort of turn the tables on the disaster of 2018, but I think they were fortunate. They ran up against an aging European Ryder Cup team that put too much faith in Ian Poulter and Garcia and Lee Westwood and Paul Casey, who collectively were 4-10-0.
Yeah, but you saw some of the big bats in the lineup are not here this week. I'm talking about Dustin Johnson, who was 5-0 in Wisconsin. Bryson DeChambeau had a good Ryder Cup. Tony Finau did not make this team as well. One thing to win at home, fine, you should. Win a President's Cup, fine, you should. You establish dominance in this Ryder Cup by winning here. The U.S. hasn't done it in some 30 years. Jaime Diaz joins us now. Jaime, you think this week for the United States will be a referendum on the task force, which was created after the debacle, Glen Eagles, where you captained in 2014. It was a debacle for the U.S. side. Why do you say that?
Well, I think whichever way it goes, there's going to be a very dramatic spin put on it. If the U.S. were to lose, I think that Paris, 2018, big loss for the Americans after winning 2016 quite handily, would not be looked at as a one-off. It would not be looked at as an aberration. It would be looked at as perhaps a pattern of not being able to win as intended in foreign countries. Overseas, obviously, at Paris and Rome. And so there'd be the feeling that, gee, the task force didn't really do what it was intended to do. Even though we can still win at home, we're not doing the big thing, which is winning on the road. If they were to win on the heels of winning at Whistling Straits, I think there'd be the sense that these have been the right decisions, and we have a momentum going forward, and let's double down on what the task force does.
Why did they create the task force, and what was it intended to do?
Well, 2014, as you know, there was a very contentious press conference, or at least a dramatic press conference, in which Phil Mickelson, with Tom Watson very close by with a tight smile, really criticized that direction of that team. He said there was not enough player buy-in, there was not enough collaboration, that the team had lost its direction since 2008 when Paul Azinger was the captain, when the players were consulted a lot more, and basically said, we've got to get back to that. And shortly after, 2 weeks later, they started this 11-man task force, which included some past captains and some players like Tiger and Stricker and Mickelson himself. And they came up with, more player buy-in, a succession plan, very much like what Europe had already had. I think was quite heavily influenced, not just by Europe in general, but by Paul's leadership in 2014. There was this sense of let's have more camaraderie, let's have a closer team, and basically let's consult with the players, again, player empowerment. That was sort of the big principle.
I want to play something for you. On the day that Zach Johnson made his captain's selections, Jordan Spieth spoke up about what he's sort of looking for in his overall Ryder Cup experience. Here's Jordan.
Guys just have a lot more fun the entire week. I mean, these are really special events that don't come around often, and I think, for those of us who plan on playing on them, I'll look back and say I had a great time that week, not I was stressed the whole week. And that balance has been really fun because we love what we do. We love preparing. We love recovering. But we also like the difference in being able to hang out with guys that, we have our own teams on the road, and it's nice to collectively combine them all.
So, Paul, I'll ask you, you've been a part of so many Ryder Cups, and you captained Europe, winning side in 2014. Do you see a change in the way the Americans are going about it, and in what ways?
Yeah, I do. I see a continuity now more so between the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup. I see succession planning, as Jaime quite rightly identified, in terms of the captains leading the captains in. I think also, I take Jaime's point. I mean, they've been tested once against a really tough team, and they fell on their face in Paris. And, the President's Cups have come pretty easily, and the Ryder Cups have certainly come easy. We didn't put up any resistance in Whistling Straits. So this is going to be a real test for them. I think we're going to find out a lot of answers here. But I'll say on the other side as well, too, Europe, we're not so good on the road either. We have a good template at home, and we do things really well at home, but we have a lot of questions, a lot of things to fix away from home. We haven't identified that again, identified what is really important in there, and we haven't really approached away matches, certainly since we did in way back in the Miracle at Medina. So that's another down the road. But I think you're right, Jaime, and I think he's absolutely right. There's going to be a lot of questions answered this week. How they come up against, because this is a strong European team, and this will be really testing the American team this week. I'm interested to see how America do against what is going to be a very hostile word. I mean, it's a word that was used there by Todd, and I think that could be correct. It's going to be a very vociferous, noisy crowd.
Yeah, I think you make a great point right there. There's an ugly trend in the game of golf. There's always been some heckling here and there, and certainly in the Ryder Cup, but it seems to have gotten uglier and uglier. And that psychic hurdle of not being on home turf and the deadening verbiage that's going to come the U.S.'s way. They notoriously have not been particularly good at dealing with that. But on the other hand, the team's younger. And I will say, look, task force, they created that. It seemed to me like to give the players more power, more direction in it. That's a good thing, I suppose, to the extent that they didn't have it. But I just argue that the group dynamics of the Ryder Cups, and you go back to 1997 on the U.S. side, they had sort of, and as I said last night, a little bit of derision is good, but not when that derision is working to undermine the team. And I felt like Phil's the commonality of all these losing teams. He's the one player that was on all those teams. And I would also say this about Tiger. It's like Tiger, through no fault of his own, scared the hell out of people. Even the people that were playing with him, I think, were diminished. And the others thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm playing Tiger Woods. I'm supposed to lose. So, I think that helps explain their poor records to some extent and the losses on the U.S. side. And the fact, it sounds crazy, it's counterintuitive, but the teams are better off without those two players on there. Maybe not from a leadership standpoint from Tiger Woods. His leadership is going to be so important going forward. They love him, and rightly so. But as a player, I felt like he, to some extent, did diminish those around him.
Yeah, tellingly, Phil did say he really regretted those comments to Watson, one of the great regrets of his career. Although at the time, he felt like, that was the catalyst that needed to happen. Just very quickly, to use Jordan Spieth as an example, he called in 2018 and said, I don't want to play with Patrick Reed, I want to play with Justin Thomas. Understandable. However, was that really the best thing for the team? Because then that forced Tiger, who was going to play with Justin Thomas, to play with Patrick Reed, and that kind of messed up the chemistry. So, again, here it is, player empowerment can go against what's best for the whole sometimes.
If the United States wins, they will have won 6 of the last 7 Cup competitions, Ryder President's Cups, going back to 2014. And the aftermath gave us the task force